We want to install a garden shed in our yard here in South Florida. Now the situation here may be a little different from what you're accustomed to in your neck of the woods because this is a hurricane area, so everything has to be built according to stricter codes and it has to be sturdier, and you have to take extra precautions, and all sorts of things like that come into play when you gotta do something like that here. Exterior construction. So we bought a severe weather garden shed, which is rated for high winds and missile impact, or whatever they call it. When things and debris fly into it. We bought the garden shed, then we went to the city to get a permit for it, which we got, thankfully. And then we started to prepare the ground for the foundation, because according to the plans for the garden shed, we need to build this. We needed to dig this deep into the ground to lay the foundation, and we've got to fill all of that with concrete. I'm going to put rebars over there, and I'm going to put wire mesh over there, and it's all going to come up above the ground 5 inches minimum. I'm actually going to raise it about a foot because the ground over here floods quite a bit when it rains a lot. It doesn't drain very well over here. We're close to the intercoastal and whatever. So we have to raise it at least 5 inches above the ground. We have to dig a foot into the ground deep. So the trench is a foot deep and a foot wide, and then we've got to have a gradation between 45 to 60 degrees slope that comes up on the inner edge of the trench, like you see there. And so we've got to lay the rebar in the trench, the wire mesh above, right here on this mound or grave, whatever you want to call it. It looks like a mass grave to me, but it's kind of morbid, but anyway. So we've got to do that, and we've got to come up with a frame, a wooden frame around here, so the concrete so we can pour it in there. We dug this by hand, foolishly. I didn't realize that we could actually buy a digger, or we could rent one. So we dug this by hand. It took us 3 days, my wife and I. All right, so it's done now. The next step, of course, is to put the wooden frame around it, and then to lay something that's called a vapor barrier, which is a thick plastic foil. I chose a 6 mil or 6M, I don't know, 6 mil. It's fairly thick, transparent plastic foil. We're going to lay that on the ground, and then we're going to put the rebar, and then we're going to lay the wire mesh, and that's going to be the foundation for the concrete that we're going to pour. We're gonna start working on the frame. Check in with you later. So we passed the initial building inspection, which means we can start pouring the concrete. Just want you to have another look at what we had to go through. So we have to raise it up this much off the ground, which is about a foot off the ground here, because the ground level over there is much higher than here. So there's a slope coming up like this, and the foundation has to raise itself 5 inches off the ground here at the very least. So I planned for 5.5–6 inches off the ground here, and that means it's going to be level from here all the way down there. We're going to need to carry the same level down, and that means almost a foot off the ground over there. So yeah, rebar on the bottom. Rebar on the bottom, number 5 rebar all the way around, and then wire mesh for the foundation here. Yep, next step is pouring a whole lot of concrete. Then the engineering inspection, and then the final building inspection, and then we're done. But I initially thought this was government overkill in terms of going overboard with regulations and whatnot after Hurricane Andrew. I changed my mind since then because I found out a few more things. It turns out to be a combination of factors. Yes, the regulations changed, became much stricter after Hurricane Andrew, but in our case, with this garden shed, it turned out to be the company going overboard with the plans for the garden shed. You see, this particular model that we got, it's the company's name is Arrow. They make garden sheds of all kind, but this is a particular model called the Homestead. It's an 8x10 shed, and it's made for severe weather. And I'm not sure why, but they require a foundation this deep for that garden shed. And it makes no sense to me because this is not a house. You could actually build a house on this foundation. You're only going to be putting a prefab metal shed on it. It's not that heavy. It doesn't need a foundation this deep. So the only thing I can think of is the company itself, Arrow, went nuts when it put the plans together for the shed to get it approved for the Dade County building code. So we passed the second inspection, which was the engineering inspection. We also finished pouring the concrete slab, as you can see. And the next step now is laying the foundation for the garden shed, which means I'm going to be driving Hilti anchors into the concrete slab and securing the foundation to them, and then starting to assemble the walls. So I'm going to get to work on that. Alright, so the rails that form the foundation of the garden shed have been fixed to the concrete slab with 3/8 by 5-inch Hilti anchors. Next step is assembling the walls of the garden shed, which is going to be a fairly involved affair. So it's going to take some time. By now we've finished assembling the walls, and now we're getting ready to do the roof. The installation is pretty much a matter of following the instructions that came with the manual. It's just that it's tedious. There are a lot of screws to tighten and a lot of things to fit together, and the instructions sometimes have mistakes, so it just takes a bit, but it's getting there. You've got to really be careful, and when you're assembling the roof panels, particularly these roof elements, support elements. I forget what the name for these things is. Gables? No, not gables, but beams. That's it, roof beams. Because the instructions are very, very poor when it comes to assembling this part right here in particular. The center beam and the supporting brace and the brace that goes like this between the two beams that you anchor together with these screws. The instructions are unbelievably bad when it comes to this, so just be careful. The important thing to remember is this does not go here. It goes like this diagonally, so you keep it apart until you need to use it. And then this one goes in between the two beams that you assemble together, along with the sides of the roof. You see? It's sandwiched in between the two roof beams. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, you're gonna run into a lot of confusion. So yeah, this is the Arrow HS108 garden shed. Not a recommended model to buy. So Arrow gives me this roll of what they call weather stripping tape. They say to apply it to the creases here in the roof cables after you nail them in. This is duct tape all day long, but it's called weather stripping tape here, so I guess you can really use duct tape for just about everything.